Hi, this is Sharon Colvin, and this is part of my series, What is Sharon Reading? It is December, and I have an enormous pile of books to tell you about. First, let me just give you a rundown on how you get to this information and how you get to the archives. This is our website, libraries.vermont.gov. If you click on Services right here on the left, and then you go to Children and Teens, either here on the left or in the center, whichever one. And then you go to Youth Services Toolkit. This is where I've kind of organized everything that you might need in your day-to-day library life. There's all kinds of information here. But if you scroll down just a little bit to Reader's Advisory and collections information, you can get information on things you can borrow from here. You can look at discussion book lists. People ask a lot about the titles we have multiple copies of. You can take a look there. You can also borrow review sources and journals from us. We subscribe to everything, and you should take advantage of that. So if you go to Reader's Advisory and Collections information, right here on the top, there's the series of my new books, which is the live action one, and there's my December show right here, and that's where I go over the new books that have come into my office. And then right here, What is Sharon Reading? And that's my review of the novels that I've been reading. I am in charge of all three Vermont Book Awards, Children's Book Awards, so I do read a lot. Especially this time of year, we're all trying to cram in a lot of reading as the calendar year wraps up, because we make those big decisions in March and April. So time is getting short. So this video is going to be posted right here as soon as I'm done, and you can check in on it. You can also take a look down here. There's more information. There's information about how to use LibraryThing. You can definitely use that on your own, or you can feel free to use mine. This is LibraryThing right here. This is a review source. It's a social media resource, and it's something I've been using for a few years. Obviously, I have 1,200 books cataloged, and basically what I do is I catalog each book that I read, only novels, no picture books, and it keeps the image of the cover there that helps me remember, and then I put tags in, and the tags may not make sense to you, but they make sense to me, and that helps me remember. And also, one of the cool things is I can pull up things by theme, and you can learn more if you watch my my recording of how to use LibraryThing. All right, so let's stop here. We stopped the last recording right around here. So we're going to start with the new K.L. Going book, Pieces of Why. Now, K.L. Going is one of my favorite authors. Let me pull it up on Amazon. Amazon is a librarian's best friend. Here we go. I can't type and talk at the same time. It's a shortcoming. All right. K.L. Going wrote Fat Kid Rules the World, Liberation of Gabriel King, Saint Iggy, and she just writes wonderful, wonderful stuff. The cover of this book, I have to tell you, is a little lackluster. It looks a little cheesy, maybe, and yeah, I don't really understand this. So if you can get past that, and you're going to have trouble selling it to your kids, because this is an urban book, which you won't get from the cover. So this is a book about a kid, Tia, who lives in New Orleans in kind of a tough neighborhood, which I love. You don't hear a lot about these really gritty neighborhoods in New Orleans. Books today especially are all talking about Katrina, which is great. It's important. But what about those neighborhoods that were struggling even before Katrina and continue to struggle? So she lives in a neighborhood that has a lot of violence, a lot of kind of unsavory characters. And so she and her mom live alone, and she knows her dad is in prison, but she doesn't really know the details as to why. And her mom works really hard to give her a good life. Now, Tia is a singer, and she is in a choir called the Rainbow Choir, which is this kind of diversity choir, and it's all about bringing people together and promoting peace. And she really wants to save the world with her voice, which is so cute and just so innocent and pure. And, you know, I think it's every week or so, she goes with her best friend Keisha, and they walk through the city to this church where they sing, and they really want to promote togetherness. Now, in the middle of all of this, one day when she's singing, there's a drive-by shooting and a little child is killed. And it really, really affects the neighborhood, and it really affects Tia to the point where she stops singing. And while she's kind of dealing with her feelings about this shooting and this senseless death, she comes to some realizations about the people who are involved and about what her father did. She realized that she never asked any questions, and she has some vague memories of him, but she doesn't really know the details, and other people seem to know more than she does. So she starts to dig around a little bit, and she finds out some things she didn't really want to know. So this is a tough book. You can start to see why I have a problem with the cover. The cover makes it look very juvenile and easy. This is not an easy book at all. It is recommended for grades 4 to 7. There is no outward violence. There's no sex. She has kind of an innocent romance with one of the other boys in the choir, and I think they hold hands at one point, but that's it. But this is tough stuff. You know, there's death, definitely, and the whole concept of having a parent in prison is tough. So, but I do think this could be a really wonderful book club book, or a classroom read. It's tackling some of these issues that I think kids are really thinking about right now. Things like, it's an issue across the country. Things like prejudice, things like violence and guns, and what does it all mean? So I really think K.L. Going is she's one of my favorite authors. I think she just writes really wonderful, gritty books. And this is one of her first young books. And I was duly impressed. So there you go. Next is Paperweight. Now, this book, I only gave it 3.5 stars because I don't know about you, but I'm getting kind of sick of the books about eating disorders. I've been a librarian for a long time, so I've read a lot of these books. This book has been compared to Winter Girls, and I'm sorry, you just can't compare it to Winter Girls. Laura Halsey Anderson wrote Winter Girls, and it's one of the best books ever written. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest you write it and that you buy it for your library. It's wonderful. It is one of the most heart-wrenching books about body image and eating disorders that I've ever read in my life. And I just don't think, those are fighting words right there, comparing it to that book. And I don't think it really rises to that level. However, I do think it's an interesting book, and if you need more books about eating disorders, this could be a good addition to your collection. This is about a girl, she's 17, and it's written in a way where her background kind of unfolds. You don't know a lot about her in the beginning, and you're not sure if she's anorexic or bulimic, and you're not sure if she's suicidal. You're not really sure what's wrong with her, but you know she's in a treatment center, and she's been committed there for, I think it's 2 months, and her family, her dad specifically, has put her in this treatment center, and it's a very regimented place where they tell her exactly what to eat and when to go to the bathroom and when to go to therapy, and people follow her around, and it's horrible. You know, her independence is completely gone. And she starts talking in this countdown, which is fairly creepy, because she thinks she's not going to live to be released from this center because she's going to end her life. And she starts talking about how she killed her brother. And then this story unfolds, and this is where I just think I am getting tired of these stories. There are quite a few of these stories where kids talk about how they killed their sibling or they killed their best friend or whatever. And of course, you come to find out that they feel incredibly guilty, but it's not really their fault. And that's a trope that I'm tired of personally. But if you have need of it, kids are going to love it. So she is going to end her life, and she's planning this, and she's counting down, and to her it's kind of a relief of, you know, I only have a certain number of days left, so I don't have to suffer anymore. And she's going to kill herself on her on the anniversary of her brother's death. And of course it unfolds, and it wasn't her fault, and you hear a lot about her friends and some of the crazy stuff that was going on. None of it is really new territory, but it is definitely it's, a fresh take on it. And the fact that it takes place in a hospital gives it a little different twirl. It's up to you. I don't think it's necessary in life, but I won't judge you if you buy it. How's that? Okay, let's move on to something a little more lighthearted. A Dragon's Guide to the Care and Feeding of Humans. The cover is phenomenal. You got to look at it. This book has been on my list for a while, and I finally got to read it. I really liked this book. I thought it was pretty cute. It's one that was sent to us for consideration for the Canfield Fisher Award, and I definitely think it has some promise. So this is about basically these two friends. So you have this dragon whose name I don't remember at the moment. Hold on a sec, I'll tell you. Let's see. You can't tell, but I can't see my whole screen. All right, Miss Drake. Okay, Miss Drake is the very austere and prim and proper dragon, and she had a pet human, and her pet human left and passed away, and so now she was very sad, and so now she has inherited a new pet human who I think is her niece, Winnie. And Winnie's 10, and she's never had a dragon before, and she's never been owned by a dragon before. And so they have kind of a confusing kind of, how does this work in the beginning? And so she's been told some secrets by her aunt about, how to get to Miss Drake's lair and the secrets of the house where she's living. And then what happens is they become kind of reluctant friends. And Miss Drake really isn't sure about this 10-year-old. And this 10-year-old likes to draw all the time, and she's just not sure. And so she ends up giving her a notebook to draw in, and or she gets it somewhere, I'm not sure, but it ends up being magical. And she starts drawing pictures, and they call them sketchlings, which I just think is the cutest word ever. Sketchlings. So she draws these sketchlings, and unfortunately the sketchlings come alive, and they escape, and now they're all over Seattle. And so now the two of them have to come together and go and catch them. And of course, she has no idea what she drew, and Miss Drake is trying to get her to remember exactly how many of those creatures did you draw, and how many of them are out there. And so they have some great adventures. This book definitely seems like part of a series. It definitely had that feel of this is just one of their adventures. I think the kids will really like it. It's short. Let me see exactly how many, 160, and it's for grades 4 to 7, could be even younger. It's really, cute, short, little take, and Lawrence Yep is great as a great author, so I recommend it. All right, so, and actually, there we go. So sometimes I click on things I don't mean to click on. I don't know. Okay, next one. Last in a long line of Rebels. Okay, I have to just tell you, this is a good book, but it's not my kind of book. This is one of those books that kind of drives me nuts. It's kind of a historical mystery, quiet, talky book where not a lot happens, and there's not, I don't know. It's just not my style of book. There was another book that I read last year, was called something on Maple Hill, it was the same kind of story. And, we have these discussions in the Canfield Fisher committee, and it's the same group of people who love these books versus those of us who just don't. So, everyone has their own reading style, and this is just not my thing. However, having said that, it is a decent story, and I think your kids could like it if they like those kind of quiet, historical mystery kind of books. So it takes place in present day, and it's about a girl who is eavesdropping, and she hears that her house might be torn down. It was built in the Civil War, and she really, really wants to find something historical about the house so that they won't tear it down. And so she goes on a mission to find information, and she finds all kinds of crazy stuff about the slaves and abolitionists and Underground Railroad, and kind of these clues about how her house was used in the past. And the thing that kind of bugs me is there was this very kind of forced parallel between the prejudice in the past and the prejudice in the current day. So one of her friends is I think it's her friend or her brother. I don't remember. I read too many books this month. I don't remember. Isaac. He is a football player, and he is applied to a university, and the coach doesn't want to recommend him, and he doesn't want to give him a scholarship because he's black. And so that part is a little bit forced. I mean, it's important, obviously, but the parallels are what's being forced, in my opinion. So, you have this present day prejudice that's supposed to be paralleling the past. So there's a little bit of a mystery. There's a little bit of kind of sleuthing going on. Like I said, it's not my favorite thing, not my cup of tea, but I think that your kids will like it if they like that kind of thing. Okay, Sunny Side Up. I have a bunch of graphic novels in this line. That's partly why I was able to read so many books this month, is because I read a whole bunch of graphic novels. And this is one of them, Sunny Side Up by Jennifer Holm. We all love her. Of course, she wrote Baby Mouse. And this book, I wonder if there are any pictures of the inside. It's in, not, here we go. So it's in her typical style, which is really wonderful, and takes place, there you go, 1976, the year before I was born, in Florida. And so what happens is that there's this girl, I love her face. She has been sent to Florida to spend the summer with her grandparents. And as she's there, it kind of unfolds why she's there. I'm not actually sure how many pages they're going to have in here, but she thinks her grandparents are weird. Look, they have the 8-track, and they smoke, and I love the old 70s car, and they have these plans for her, and she's just not interested. It's typical grandparent kind of thing, and she comes to find out a whole bunch of stuff about her family that is kind of interesting. She's having adventures with a friend who loves comic books, and they have a whole bunch of adventures. But, he starts asking questions about why is she in Florida at all? And she starts kind of remembering and thinking and asking questions, and finds out, doesn't really discover, but remembers and learns that her brother is really, really having some trouble, struggling with alcohol, and is having a lot of trouble. And her parents sent her away so that she could have a safe place to spend the summer while her brother is kind of putting himself back together. So this is, again, tough topic. The thing I worry about with this book, it's recommended for grades 4 to 6, and definitely, it looks like a really fun book, but it's got a dark edge to it. And here's the thing: it takes place in 1976, which is not a time period I think kids are really going to relate to. As an adult, I wasn't alive in 76, but I know about it, and so I recognize the cars, I recognize the music. It's kind of these inside jokes that adults might get. I don't know that the kids would. So I worry about that a little bit. However, once people hear that Jennifer Holm read it, they're going to want to read it. So use your discretion. It's up to you. I mean, some kids might really like it. But I don't know. I'm not sure that the 70s really have the appeal that, I don't know. Did the 70s ever have appeal? I don't know. All right, Lumberjanes. Now, this is a series you need to own. So this is volume 1. I just read volume 1, and there are several volumes out now. And this author, Noelle Stevenson, has been busy. Oh my gosh. She's written a ton of stuff recently, really great stuff. And this book is slim. Let me see if I can Here we go. So this is the cover of the book. Now, my favorite part about this book is look at these girls. There is not a typical girl in the bunch. They are all unique. They're all individuals, and they express their womanhood in a very different ways, and they make no apologies for it. I especially love this. You'll see this haircut again in Nimona, which is just so great. So, hold on a second. Like I said, I can only see half my screen when I do this, so bear with me. Here we go. So you have 5 best friends, and they are at a camp called Lumberjane. It's kind of like Girl Scouts, only more hardcore. And in the beginning of the book, there's all this information about scouting. It's like a scouting manual and letters, information I think the kids will really get a kick out of. And of course, there's information about Yetis and monsters and all kinds of crazy adventures that they'll have and tests that they have to go through. So it's really short. It's just about their little adventure. And I think this whole series is just going to be wonderful. It's kind of, they describe it as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Definitely, they are kind of ass-kicking girls who are out there to defeat Mother Nature, which is just, who could not like that? So you definitely need this series. It's in paperback, and a couple of them are out right now. So I think that your kids will really like it. And it's younger. There's a little bit of violence, but I definitely think it's appropriate for the young kids. All right, Crenshaw. Now, this book I think is really interesting. Catherine Applegate wrote The One and Only Ivan, which I have to admit is not my favorite book. However, Crenshaw is really, really wonderful. And Crenshaw is an imaginary friend. He's a cat. And he was the imaginary friend of this boy, Jackson, when he was a little boy. And but now his family is having a really hard time. They got kicked out of their house. They're living in their car for a little bit, and they have no money for food, and they have to live in their minivan, and like all this stuff is happening. And life is just crummy. And so, he's trying to hold it together, and mysteriously, maybe not to us, but to him, Crenshaw shows up, and Crenshaw and he have some more adventures together. And the thing I love about this book is that kids are not going to understand, I think, why Crenshaw shows up. We, of course, know that Crenshaw shows up to help him through this crisis of trying to understand what's happening with his family. And, getting kicked out of your house is no small deal. And so Crenshaw is there to really help him through this. And, to us, it's pretty obvious. To the kids, it may not be. And it's kind of a soft introduction to what happens when families fall in hard times, and what is it like not to have enough food, and and the father has MS, which is really hard, and he lost his job, and it's a hard tale. So it does have a happy ending, and it is definitely appropriate for, they recommend it for grades 4 to 6, definitely appropriate. It's a short read, it's very sweet, but I highly, highly recommend it. It has that classic feel to it, which I do not say lightly. All right, speeding right along, the Doldrums. All right, so somebody on the Canfield Fisher committee recommended this book. And, it's been compared to Rebecca Stead, which she's not one of my favorite authors. I know I could be put in library jail for all the things I say on these podcasts. I'm not a fan of magical realism, and I don't like this style of book. However, having said that, this book is really good, and the audio production is absolutely hilarious. So I think if you have kids who really like these kind of quiet books where nothing really happens, they have all these adventures, they plan all these adventures, but they never actually leave their hometown. I think there are people out there who like that kind of story, obviously. It's just not my cup of tea. So this is a book about a boy named Archer B. Helmsley, and I love this name. And, he has the most boring life ever. His grandparents were lost in Antarctica. They had adventures all the time, and they had this crazy house with these kind of magical talking heads on the walls, which I don't really understand. Magical realism and Sharon don't really mix. So anyway, the parents, their reaction to this is to clamp down and never let him go anywhere. And so, of course, that doesn't go very well, and he wants to have an adventure. So he makes a couple of friends, and they want to have adventures, and he wants to find his grandparents. And he finds out that his grandparents had this fantastic life, and they had a lot of friends, and there's a lot of information out there, and they are going to travel to Antarctica. Of course, they never really go to Antarctica, and not a lot actually happens. But, I really like the characters, and I thought it was an interesting storyline, and I think the kids will really like it, especially kids who like these kind of whimsical, kind of magical stories. And it's hilarious. The parents are just hysterical because, of course, they're afraid of everything, which I think kids today will just get a total kick out of, because that's just, kids will like it. All right, The Marvels. If you haven't bought this book, you definitely should. It weighs a ton. It is an enormous book, but it's Selznick's new book. I wonder if it says how much it weighs. No. Oh, yeah, here you go, 3 pounds. It is heavy. Yeah, you could use this as a hand weight. It's 672 pages. Again, Selznick has managed to put together an enormous book that it's just like Hugo Cabret, it's about the same size, but it's not actually that challenging to read. So if you have reluctant readers or readers who struggle, they'll be very proud of themselves for having read a 700-page book, but in reality, it's not as challenging as it looks. So the first half, so the first maybe 300 or 400 pages is just images, and it's images of this family called the Marvels, and they have all these journeys, and it's about their kind of theater experiences. There's a lot of playbills, there's a lot of stories and fantasies and adventures, and it's all pictures. It's not comic book written, it's pictures. Let me see if they can see. Nah, they're not gonna tell us. So it's all pictures, and then you get to text about halfway through the book. Well, maybe 2/3 of the way through the book. And then the text takes place in kind of present, I think it's present day-ish. Anyway, it's like 100 years later, so maybe in the past. And it's about a kid who has run away from school and has found his uncle in London. And he finds all these mysteries in the house, and it connects back to that wonderful history that you got in the images in the beginning of the book. So that part is kind of interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of this style of narration, but I liked this book. I thought it was interesting. I read it in a couple of hours. It's not super long, and the whole idea of looking for your family roots is interesting. So, and you're gonna buy it anyway, so I might as well tell you about it. All right, moving along. Nimona. I was telling you that Laura Stevenson has been busy. All right, Nimona is even better than Lumberjanes. I love this book, and I told you would see this haircut again, and here it is. Or maybe it's backwards. I'm not sure, but this whole shaving part of it I think is fascinating. So Nimona is she wants to be a superhero, and what happens is that she hooks up with this guy. What is his name? Lord Ballister Blackheart. He's a villain, and she knocks on his door one day and says, "Hi, I'm here to be your sidekick." And he's like, "I don't need a sidekick," and she says, "Yeah, you do." And so basically, she's kind of his reluctant sidekick, and it's very deadpan and very hilarious. And he is just the goofiest villain you've ever met. He has this arch rival, and basically they were friends or something, and they had some goofy falling out. And she's just really, really smart and tries to help conquer him, but the violence in it is so funny. So it's not like a lot of blood and guts. It's just like trying to thwart each other. It's a lot of talking and a lot of, I can outsmart you and I can trick you. And of course she's there telling him what to do and showing up at inopportune times. And it's hilarious. So this is a heftier book. It's a little bit bigger than Lumberjanes. It's, let's see. It's not going to tell me how many pages. Oh yeah, 272. So it's a bigger book. It's beautifully done. The kids will really, really like it. They're saying grade 7 and up. I think that's probably fair. Maybe even 6. There's a little bit of violence, like I said, but it's not, it's nothing terrible. And I think, this is a good standalone book, and I think kids who like superheroes and unconventional superheroes will like this. She's kind of short. She's not super thin, which I love to see in these superhero comic books. She's got this goofy haircut, and she chose this. She's actually a shapeshifter, and she chose this this incarnation, which I think is wonderful. So I think the kids will get a kick out of that. So there you go, another graphic novel for you. All right, another graphic novel. I told you I was on a roll with this one. Okay, Drowned City. This is another book about Hurricane Katrina. We are wrapping up the year of the 10th anniversary of Katrina. So we had a bunch of books published. This book is really good. I really like it. It is one of the starker. There's not a lot of images here, but you can kind of see his art style. It's one of the more stark portrayals of Hurricane Katrina. It's all in this kind of gray tones, and it's very real. And it's nonfiction, so it's a lot of numbers and information from what was actually happening, and quotes from FEMA and from the president and all this kind of stuff. The one thing that bugged me a little bit is there is a list of resources at the end with citations and where they got all the information. I would have liked to see, and I'm not sure how I would have done it, but I would have liked to see specifically where some of these statistics or quotes came from. Just because, media coverage these days is so, it's so popularized and so it's just conflated that I worry about where some of this information is coming from. So I would have liked to see specifically, but that's my grown-up librarian nitpickiness. Other than that, it's really great. It's a good introduction to Katrina for kids who want a good introduction. The money from the book goes to Habitat for Humanity, and I think it could be really good. They recommend it for grade 7 and up. I think it could go for a little bit younger. However, like I said, the information about the politics and FEMA, that kind of stuff is going to go over those young kids' heads. This book, I always struggled as a librarian with graphic nonfiction. My kids never check this stuff out. So it kind of depends on your population. If you have kids who like this kind of stuff, or if you have reluctant readers who like nonfiction, this could be a great addition to your collection. You may have enough Hurricane Katrina stuff to, take you through the year. So up to you. All right, let's go a little bit younger. This, here it is. Told you I can't talk and type at the same time. All right, this is Escape from Baxter's Barn. And if you look at the cover, it has this kind of classic feel to it. The art is absolutely beautiful, and it has this kind of Charlotte's Web look to it. I just think it is wonderful. This is one of those books you can give to pretty much any child of any age, and this is one of those books you could read as a family and everyone would enjoy it, just like Charlotte's Web. So this is about this family of animals, and I just love their names. Let me see if I can remember all their names. Yeah, they're not going to tell you. anyway, you got to read it. Their names are fantastic. Burdock is the cat. And so you have goats and sheep and pigs, and you have an owl and horses, and they all form this family, and they live in the barn together. And Baxter is a one-eyed cat who had his adventures and looked for some place for him to sleep one night and found them and became part of the family. Now he's a cat, so he's wily and he can get in and out. But the other animals are locked in the barn every night. And one day, Baxter is sleeping by the stove, which he's not supposed to do, and he hears the owner talking about the farm and how he's going to burn down the barn. And we never find out if that's true or not, but they decide together that they're all going to escape from the barn and go find somewhere else to live. And you can imagine the hijinks that ensue from that. So they have to distract the farmer, and they have to try to figure out how to open the latch and get out of the barn. And this helpful owl comes in and tries to help them figure out where to go. But of course, flying is very different from walking, especially when you are a pig or a sheep. And so you have to think about the terrain. It's really, really interesting. Definitely worth a read. Definitely a read aloud. I would highly, highly recommend. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think the author has a Vermont connection. Let's take a look, shall we? Rebecca Bond. I don't know. There's not information on here. I want to say she has a Vermont connection somehow. Let's see. I don't know. I can't remember. And I don't have the book with me anymore. I gave it away. I'm pretty sure she does. And I think she did all the illustrations as well. Just buy it. You need it. Sharon says. All right. How about I Am Princess X? This is a hybrid book. And I have to admit, I listened to it. I didn't read it. But I flipped through someone else's copy. And it's part comic book and part illustration and mostly prose. And so this is the cover. And it's... Yeah, I wish I could see some inside pictures, but okay. So this is a story. It's kind of a combination between a friendship story and a big, like, Alex Rider-esque adventure, which is kind of a bizarre thing to put together, but it works in a lot of ways. So you have these two best friends who create a comic book called Princess X, and Princess X is this kick-ass heroine, and one girl drew the pictures, Libby and May wrote all the stories, and together they created this awesome comic book. But then Libby is in a car accident with her mom, and she passed away, and of course, there goes the comic book. But now May is 16. It's been several years, and she's in Seattle. This is the second book that takes place in Seattle. And she starts seeing these Princess X posters and stickers and website stuff everywhere. So she ends up befriending this weird character in her apartment building who hires himself out as a computer expert, and he helps her search the dark web to find out who's running this website. And she ends up finding her best friend, and she finds out that she's still alive. Then they get tangled up in this crazy, like, adventure, people are out to kill them craziness. And it's a lot of running around and hiding, and, someone's out to kill them kind of cuckoo-ness. It's good fun. The teens are going to love it. But it is in a genre all its own. So, it's kind of what teen literature is, though, right? So it's grade 7 and up. I would definitely say that. It definitely has high school appeal. And the one thing about this book, though, is it isn't going to be, it's not eternal. Talking about the dark web and about the internet and things, of course, puts expiration dates on books, unfortunately. But this is a really, really unique book. And, we don't see those very often. So I love it. All right, House Arrest. Oh, I'm getting tired. I read a lot this month. All right, House Arrest was a really interesting book. House Arrest was written in kind of journal format. It's about a boy named Timothy who's on probation. He stole a wallet from somebody, and so now he's on probation and house arrest. And part of his probation is he has to go to therapy and anger management, and he has to write in his journal. And if he does it for a whole year and stays out of trouble, then his record will be clean. Well, as it all unfolds, of course, he's this, teenager who doesn't think he needs help, and he's really resisting opening up to his therapist and probation officer, and his family is really, really struggling. And so you start to learn about, why he stole this wallet, and you come to find out that his little brother has a lot of health problems, and that they really don't have enough money to pay all their bills and buy food and take care of this baby who's in and out of the hospital. The baby has trouble breathing, and so he definitely has a bunch of scares, and the mom is having a really tough time. And so it's really complicated. He stole, he knows he did wrong, but he had a really good reason for stealing this wallet, and he doesn't make any excuses for himself, which I think is really interesting. But of course, the adults in his life, the therapist and the probation officer, they start to hear his story, and they start to help. And it's all kind of secret, like groceries end up on their doorstep, or money ends up in his pockets and things like that, which is really, really sweet. So this is a story about a boy who is just having a rough time and makes some bad decisions, but in the end, the adults that he meets through this process end up being the best thing for him. And he also has been emailing a doctor he thinks will help his brother, and he's so frustrated because this doctor isn't emailing him back. So he's just kind of a bundle of responsibility. So I think this is a really, really good book. They recommend it for 6 to 10. I think that's pretty good. I'm not sure how much the high school kids are going to really like it, but definitely middle school. And it's one of those quick, reluctant readers. It's written in journal format, and it's gritty. It's a really interesting story. So I think the kids will like it. I really liked it. All right, just because we're on the depressing roll, let's go to the Holocaust, shall we? I was actually listening to this book while I was packing boxes. Sorry, I can't talk. I can't talk and type at the same time. Oh my gosh, this is a problem. Okay, here we go. Prisoner B3087. This is a true story. The authors are Ruth and Jack Gruner, and Alan Gratz. The Gruners are the ones that this actually happened to, and Alan Gratz is a YA author who helped write it as well. And this story is absolutely haunting. It's one of the better Holocaust stories I've ever read, probably because it's true. And they pulled out a quote right here. It says, "If I had known what the next 6 years of my life was going to be like, I would have eaten more. I wouldn't have complained about brushing my teeth or taking a bath or going to bed at 8 o'clock every night." So Yannick was 10 when Germany invaded Poland. And after that, I think he ended up in 10 concentration camps? Here we go. And each one is worse than the next. And he obviously survives, but that doesn't make the story any better. It's really, really horrendous. He ends up narrowly escaping, or I don't know, he comes into contact with Oskar Schindler, but of course he's shipped out like 24 hours before Schindler makes his infamous list, so he loses his chance to be saved then, and isn't saved until the end, when the Americans come, and I think I don't remember what the last camp is that he's in, one of the really famous ones, and the Americans are there to release the prisoners. The problem is that he was a prisoner for so long that he didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to be treated kindly, and the soldiers, weren't terribly kind. They just wanted to feed them and get them home. But he didn't have a home. So imagine being in a concentration camp your entire life and then getting out and having no family, no home, no money, no job, no skills, having been starved for most of your life, and having no place to go is really bleak. So you get to this point where he's in Germany Poland, and he's just lost. But then he hears a rumor that his cousin is living there, and he meets up with them, and it's just this wonderful kind of, oh my gosh, I have family. This is one of those books I think high school kids really, I think, could really get into, because it will bring it home for them. I think the fact that it's a true story will help, but this whole idea of there were some people who were in concentration camps the bulk of their lives, and when they were released, it wasn't just about the Americans came in and saved the day. I really don't like that. That whole idea that ends up, in the history curriculum, because the Americans didn't, they didn't come in till the end. And then at the end, it wasn't just about opening the gates and letting people free. These people had to find homes. They needed to find a way to survive. And the unbelievable scars, both emotional and physical, that they carried with them for the rest of their lives. So I really think that this is a wonderful story. Grim, to say the least. They're recommending it for grades 6 to 10. I would say maybe a little older. I wouldn't go so far as 6. I'd say maybe 7 or 8. Definitely high school. This would be a wonderful classroom read, especially if you're studying the Holocaust. Could be just good if you have kids who like the Holocaust. But definitely warn them in the beginning. This is a true story, and it is descriptive, to say the least. So I think it could be good for, really bringing home the horrors of history, if that's what you need. On a lighter note, The Truth About Twinkie Pie. How could you not love this cover? Okay. I love this cover. It just makes me happy. And I picked it up, and I just knew I would love it. So The Truth About Twinkie Pie is about two sisters. You have Gigi and Dee Dee. And the best thing is that Gigi is short for Galileo Galilei. And they're both girls. And so Gigi is 12, and she's really, really smart. And she is in school, and she lives with her sister in a trailer park, and her sister is a hairstylist, and they kind of scrape by on their own. The mom is gone. We think she's dead in the beginning, but we find out later on that she actually isn't. And so the sister take care of each other, and Dee Dee really is in charge, and she brings home money, and she cooks, and she has an old recipe book from her mother that she cooks with, and it is classic 50s awesomeness, and the recipes are, of course, in the book, and they're for things like Twinkie Pie, which is Twinkies and maraschino cherries and whipped cream and all the horrible, fabulous, tasty stuff that we go into dessert. And so there are tons of recipes in this book, and they're all hysterical, and a lot of them are referenced in the chapters, like, he has a face like, Mama's famous, surprise cake or surprise chicken dinner or whatever. And then they have the recipe, which is just hysterical. And so the tricky part of this book is it goes along, and it's your normal, Gigi is in school, and she just moved into a new school, and she's getting a little bit of flack from the kids for being a quote scholarship student. She knows that the sister won the lottery, but they're not spending money like they won the lottery, and so she doesn't really understand what's happening. But somehow they're affording the tuition to the school, but she doesn't quite fit in. There are a lot of cool kids who really just torture her. And one of them ends up befriending Dee Dee and kind of taking her over, which Gigi does not like, because this girl who hates her is now friends with her sister. But then the most popular boy in school befriends her and kind of starts going with her everywhere, and they become really close friends, and everyone's jealous of it. And the interesting part is about halfway through the book, the story starts to unfold in ways that you don't expect. She finds out a lot of stuff about her mom that even I, as a reader, didn't expect. You knew it couldn't all be as easy as it was. Not that it was simple, but it seemed kind of easy. And you find out that her mom is still alive and she's an alcoholic, and I'm not going to ruin it for you, but a lot of crazy stuff that she took for granted actually happened in her life, and Dee Dee is working a lot harder than she ever imagined she was. And then she finds out some things about her friends as well, and they all have backstories that are really interesting and make them really, really great characters. And I think it's a lot about first impressions, a lot about how everybody has a story, and it's a lot about how we all have these expectations of people that aren't always true. So this is a wonderful book. I really, really recommend it. And give it a few chapters. It's not as sugary as it seems in the beginning. Grade 6 and up, definitely solid middle school book. It's not a difficult read, but some of the topics in here are tough. So it looks like a really young book, like one of those cupcake books, but it's not. It definitely has more substance to it. Okay, only a few more, I promise. All right, the rest of us just live here. So Patrick Ness is an awesome author. This book was not my favorite. I was really looking forward to this. I just thought it would be wonderful, and he's fabulous. But here's the thing, like we've talked about before, I don't like magical realism, and this was all magical realism. And, I got through it because I really wanted it to redeem itself, but I just didn't like it. And I think it's one of those love it or hate it type books. A lot of people really, really loved it. And if you have Patrick Ness fans in your library, then you need this book. It's got a bizarre premise. Basically, you have these friends who are all kind of supernatural in some way or another. The weird thing about it is in the book, it's all referenced as things that happened in the past. So none of this, like, there are no zombies or vampires or, whatever. They're not in the book exactly. They're just referenced in flashbacks, unless I missed something, which is entirely possible. So that part's just weird to me. So it's like, oh yeah, you went to school during the vampire uprising. That is strange. So you have these friends and they're all going through different things. It kind of, it has that kind of Breakfast Club kind of feel to it, where school is wrapping up and he has these friends and they're all dealing with these different issues, who to go to prom with, blah, blah, blah. But there's this like supernatural shadow over some of it. I really just did not care. I don't know. Not my favorite thing at all. The plot lines I just thought just didn't come together at all. However, a lot of people love it. So if you like magical realism and you like Patrick Ness, you should probably give it a whirl. I'm going to go ahead and fix this. Oh no, did I froze it? No, I didn't freeze it. Okay, A Handful of Stars. Now this is a book I really, really loved. Cynthia Lord is one of my favorite authors of all time, and she's actually coming to the Canfield Fisher conference this year in May. She's the keynote speaker, which I'm so excited about. Look at the puppy dog. So this book, her books tend to take place in Maine, and this takes place on an island in Maine, I think. Does it take place on an island? I'm trying to remember. I read too many books. But it's about, she lives in Maine. It's about a girl named Lily, and she is being raised by her grandparents who are French. And she's a small town girl, and she knows everybody, and she lives above the general store. And, she is just kind of the girl of the town. And she's young. I think she's about 10. And one day, her dog, who's just the love of her life, slips his collar and just runs to the blueberry fields and gets lost in the blueberry fields. And she's really worried that he's going to get hit by a car when he gets on the other side. And one of the migrant workers who's in the field sees Lucky and grabs his collar and saves him. And her name is Salma, and she's Hispanic, and as most of the migrant workers are, she's from Florida, and so they become really good friends. So there's really interesting, and I think it's relevant to what happens here in Vermont. There are definitely migrant workers here, and a lot of them come from different places, and so this is something that kids might think about. So you have this kind of caste system in the town where the migrant workers they have a different circle. They have a different experience of the island than the people who live there full time or all year round. And, they're both subject to the weather and the tourism, but they don't really cross paths. But Lily and Salma become really close friends, and they learn all about each other, and they start talking about Lucky, her dog, and Lucky is going blind. She has cataracts. And so Lily is trying to figure out how to help her, and she takes her to the vet and has been consulting her books and has learned that there's a surgery, but that it's really expensive, and she has to take her somewhere to have it done because the vet in town can't do it and doesn't recommend it for a dog that's Lucky's age. So Salma helps raise money, and they start painting these bee boxes, and they're raising money to get Lucky the surgery. And in the meantime, Salma starts to learn about the town and some of the traditions that happen. And there's this big blueberry festival, and there is a pageant that goes along with it. And anybody who lives in the town can enter the pageant. And Lily's mom is a pageant queen from way back, and Lily has never been interested in this. But Salma has decided that she wants to enter the contest. But the problem is that Salma doesn't have the money to buy a dress and do all the fancy things that the other girls do. But Lily's best friend, who she's kind of had this falling out with, they've kind of started to grow apart. Her best friend is kind of a frilly, girly girl, and she's, of course, in the pageant. And so she loans Salma an old dress and helps her out. And there's a little bit of rumblings of, she has a hand-me-down dress, whatever. But it's really fascinating. And the thing about this pageant is you have to learn all about Maine and blueberries, and she quizzes her, and it's good stuff. This is good small town goodness. I think that this is a must own for every library in Vermont, and in any small town library. I think it's a really awesome story. Cynthia Lord is just, you can't beat the way she writes. Really, really good stuff. All right, we're getting there. All right, Baba Yaga's Assistant, also a graphic novel. This is an interesting story. I love the story of Baba Yaga. I've read lots of different versions, but this one is interesting. Look how scary. So this is a story about Masha, and Masha needs an adventure. I think, I can't remember, her cousin comes to visit, I think. Let me think. Oh, right. Her father gets married. That's what it is. And her stepmother and stepsister move in. And so she does not get along with the stepsister. And she's kind of a tomboy, and the stepsister is not. And they just aren't getting along. And so she sees an ad that Baba Yaga needs an assistant. And so she decides to go on an adventure. And so she goes, and she has to figure out how to get into the chicken leg house, and she has to figure out how to pass these tests and how to please Baba Yaga. And it is fascinating. Really, really interesting twist on this classic kind of villain. She's not as villainous in this story, but definitely interesting. So these are some of the art pages. They're very interesting. A lot of visual appeal. There's Masha there with Baba Yaga. Highly, highly recommend this one. This is a great read, quick read. A little creepy, definitely creepy. So not for the preschool set, but definitely for the elementary. They'll love it, especially if they know anything about the Baba Yaga tales, because, I mean, it's classic, right? Okay, this book I had big problems with. I wanted to like this book, The Worst Class Trip Ever, and some of my colleagues in the Canfield Fisher committee really liked it and recommended it. Now, this book I will give you is funny. It's about this 8th grade group that's on a field trip to Washington, D.C. And of course, it's Dave Barry, so it's hysterical. You know, there's this one kid who farts so much that no one can stand to be near him. And of course, they're always trying to slip the chaperones, and they're just always in mischief. And of course, you have planes and buses and tours and all kinds of places for them to get into trouble. Now, here's where I have a problem. So on the plane, they are sitting in front of these mysterious guys who they have decided are terrorists. They have accents and they have big bags with them, and they're looking at a book that's like has aerial photos of Washington, D.C. And they go so far as to call the police and tell the airline that these guys are terrorists. And they just, I don't know. The big problem I have with it is because they're Middle Eastern, and these kids see them, and it's just the worst stereotyping ever. And especially with the political climate the way it is these days, I just don't think these are stereotypes or jokes that we should be taking lightly. I really have a problem with this. So you have these kind of quote terrorist types, and they just won't leave them alone. And so they follow him all over the city, and one of them steals his bag, which, I'm sorry, that's just not okay. And they are convinced that they're going to blow something up, and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, of course, they find out they have some non-terrorist agenda, but that's not a good excuse. They are from some made-up country from the Middle East, and I just think it's in really poor taste. So I would not recommend this book at all, especially with the news, happening the way it is. Not my favorite. All right, Jennifer Donnelly. I adore Jennifer Donnelly, but this book was not her best, in my opinion. I love her stuff. She wrote Revolution and Northern Light, which are two phenomenal books if you've never read them. This book was not my favorite, I think, because it was really long and kind of convoluted, a lot of characters, and while I liked the main character, Jo, following her adventures was a little tough for me. The story is a little too complicated. So, excuse me, I couldn't get into it. So it's a story about Jo. She lives in New York, I think in the 1890s. Yeah, 1890s. And, she's a proper young lady, and, she goes to a fine boarding school and is going to be betrothed to a rich man, and she has a well-to-do family, and her family owns a newspaper, and so she lives a good life. And this is around the time that Nellie Bly was starting to do her expose kind of journalism, and she gets herself locked into a mental institution and starts doing this reporting, which for a woman is absolutely scandalous at the time. And Jo really wants to be her. She wants to be a reporter. She wants to be out there in the action. So in the middle of all of this, her father dies, and she's called home from school. So she comes home from school, and the first story is that he commits suicide, which she just doesn't buy. And so she kind of she gets to be a part of the investigation. Of course, forensic science wasn't really a thing back then, so she kind of follows around with the journalists who know this scientist who has interest in this very new field of forensic science and starts talking about things like, blood analysis and things like this. And he starts talking about how he couldn't have killed himself. Maybe maybe it was an accident. Maybe he was murdered. And so she befriends one of the reporters from her father's paper and starts to kind of uncover a lot of this craziness. So in the middle of all of it, she falls in love with this reporter. But of course, there's this whole, rich girl, poor boy dynamic going on, and she feels like she has to accept the proposal of this rich boy who has proposed to her to make her family happy, and craziness ensues. I like the storyline. I just felt like it was a little convoluted the way it went from point A to point B. And I think I really like the character of Jo. I think she's awesome, gritty, definitely smart, and one of those awesome heroines from this time period, the ones who just didn't want to be held down by society's expectations. So not my favorite book of hers, but definitely, good. And some really good characters. All right, how about another graphic novel for you? The Lunch Witch, another book I read in a couple of hours. It's the first in a series, and it's wonderful. I wonder if there's any of the art here. Not really. All right, but you can get a lot from the cover. Not a lot happens in this story, but enough to be hysterical. The whole thing has this look to it, like someone has spilled a bunch of grease all over it, which I love. So the story is about this lady. She's a witch, and her name is Grinhilda, and she's a typical witch, but she needs to find a job, and so she sees an advertisement for a lunch lady, so she decides, I can do that. So she becomes a lunch lady. The problem is that she has she wants to maintain a secret identity. She doesn't want the kids to know that she's a witch. And one of the kids, Madison, she kind of acts like she might know. And so, unbeknownst to her, she starts blackmailing Grinhilda. It's so silly. Like, Madison doesn't even know what's going on, but somehow Grinhilda has decided she has to do things for her just in case she might know she's a witch. Which just, the whole story is hysterical. So they become friends, and they start kind of having adventures and pulling tricks on some of her classmates. And it's just a wonderful story. I mean, look at that face. It's just hysterical. And it combines two wonderful concepts, lunch ladies and witches. We love it. Short and sweet, and I think the kids will love it. Grades 3 to 7, yeah, absolutely. And kids who like the Lunch Lady series will probably like this one too. There's more to come. All right, we're getting close. Oh, The Boy in the Black Suit. I loved this book. And the one thing about this book, though, is I'm not sure who to recommend it to in terms of age. I wanted to see what they recommend. They say 7 and up. Yeah, I'm not sure. It doesn't have a high school feel to it, but the main character is 17. I loved the story. It's really good on audio. It's on One Click Digital. I highly recommend it. So it's a story about a kid, Matt. He's 17, and his mom has just passed away, and he is having trouble dealing with it, and he needs to get a job, and so he's at this fast food chicken place, and he's about to ask for a job, and he meets this girl who's working the counter, and of course develops an enormous crush on her, and she tells him they're not hiring, and then the funeral director who did his mother's funeral walks in and offers him a job on the spot, and he says, I don't know if I can do that, because the idea of going back to the funeral home after his mother's funeral is not something he really wants to entertain. But he does. He wears his black jacket every day, and he goes to the funeral home and he helps out. And everyone asks him, do you have to touch the bodies? No, he sets up chairs and sets up the repast and the food and takes care of people. But what the interesting part is that he starts to feel like going to these funerals is a source of comfort for him. So he kind of hangs out in the back when he doesn't have to, and he watches the people grieve, and he really gets some comfort in watching how people deal with the loss of a loved one. And it starts to help him deal with his own pain and try to understand his own grief. And he doesn't really understand. He just knows that there's something weird about this and that he likes it. And he likes trying to figure out who's the person who's in the most pain in the room and what kind of funeral is it. And is it, he starts to describe them in these generalization type ways that's hysterical, like the drive-by funerals and the really long funerals and the funny funerals. And so it's really, really fascinating. So in the meantime, he gets some flack for wearing a black suit every day. And but he has his good friends, and he lives in New York City, and he at one of the funerals he meets that girl from the chicken place again, and comes to find out that her grandmother had passed away. And so they become friends, and they start dating, and she works in a soup kitchen where her grandmother used to work, and has befriended this entire community of homeless people. And so he starts kind of hanging out with them as well. And their stories start to unfold about, his mother died of breast cancer, and also his father is not dealing with it well. He's gone on an alcoholic binge and got in a car accident, has now been in the hospital for several months. So he's been living on his own. And the girl that he meets, her name is Love. She's also on her own. And you learn a lot about, what's happened to her. And she's kind of unflappable. And all this horrible stuff has happened to her, and she's like, I'm fine, I can deal. And, meanwhile, he's really struggling. And so he's really kind of fascinated by her. And they come to find out that their stories are kind of intertwined in a way that makes him a little uncomfortable. So this is a great, great story. I really think it's one of the best stories I've ever read about grief. It's also a really good urban story, and I think it has that middle school feel to it. It could be good for high school as well. There's definitely some violence in it and grief, no sex, but the whole idea of having to get a job and having to live on your own, tough stuff. But definitely one of my favorites that I've read recently. All right, another book. My last one, I promise. I finished this book last night. That's why there's no review there yet. I really loved it. Natalie Perkins is one of my favorite authors of all times. I know her fairly well, and she's just wonderful. And if you don't own or haven't read Rickshaw Girl, you definitely should. This is another short book of hers that's wonderfully illustrated, just like this one. And it's the same illustrator as Rickshaw Girl. She's a cute little tiger. Let me see how many pages this is. Wow, look at all those reviews. 144 pages. Okay, it's really, really short. And it's about a boy who lives in an island. It's called the Sunderlands, and it's near Bengal. And so he lives on this island, and there's a tiger reserve on the island. And the tigers are protected, and so when they have cubs, it's a really big deal. And this female tiger has had 2 cubs, and they're very excited about it, and the rangers are very protective, but one of the cubs has escaped. And the problem is that there is this kind of, malevolent businessman named Gupta who wants this tiger to sell on the black market. And the boy, Neil, the main character, he doesn't want that to happen. And he really wants to save this tiger. So he and his sister go on an adventure to try to save this tiger. Now, of course, that's not something that is condoned by their parents. Their money is very tight in their family, and the sister is supposed to be, in the house and clean and proper, and he is supposed to be studying for a scholarship, and is not supposed to be out all night in the mud. And the mom had a disease, I want to say tuberculosis or something, and so she isn't doing terribly well, so she doesn't leave home very often. And the father is working really hard, so he's not supposed to be out having adventures like this. But it's a really sweet story. He does end up saving the cub. Of course he does, because this is a young book. And they end up putting him back in the reserve, and he gets to name her. It's really sweet. And also, I think the descriptions of the Sunderlands are so vivid. I think it would really give the kids some insight into what it's like to live in this different part of the world. And this kid is just awesome, really smart, and wants to help make his home better, which is wonderful. So there you go. Highly recommend it. So I'm now reading these 2 books, and they're fabulous so far, but I won't tell you about them until I'm done. And that's all I got for you. So I hope that you enjoyed my rambling, and that you have a wonderful holiday, and I will see you very soon in January. Take care, everyone.